Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Rupi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Karjana Ranjana Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari
Should these glasses be illegal in the U.S.?
Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Nitai Gaura Pramanande Hirivo. So today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 9, and the text 31. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Aho bata mamaman anya atnyam Manda Bhagavasya Pasyata Bhavachida Padamulam Gatvavachevad Antavat Ahobatyamamanatmyam Manda Bhagavasya Pasyata Bhavachida Padamulam Gatvavachevad Anatvat Ahobatamamanyatvyam Atmavyam Manda Bhagavasya Pashyata Bhavachida Padamulam Gatvavachevad Antavat Ahobatamama Anatyam Manda Bhagavasya Pasyata Bhavachida Padamulam Gatvavachevad Antavat Ahobhavatyam Manda Bhagavasya Pasyata Bhavachida Padamulam Gatvavachevad Antavat Ahobatamamatyam Manda Bhagavasya Pasyata Bhavachida Padamulam Gatvavachevad Antavat. Translation. Alas, just look at me. I am so unfortunate. I approach the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who can immediately cut the chain of the repetition of birth and death, but still, out of my foolishness, I prayed for things which are perishable. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The word anatyam is very significant in this verse. Atma means the soul, and anatmya means without any conception of the soul. Srila Rishabhavdev instructed his sons that unless a human being comes into the point of understanding the Atma, or spiritual position, whatever he does is ignorance, and this brings only defeat in his life. Dhruva Maharaj regrets his unfortunate position, for although he approached the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is always able to give his devotee the highest benediction of cessation of the repetition of birth and death, which is impossible for any demigod to offer, he foolishly wanted something perishable. When Hiranyakashipu asked immortality from Lord Brahma expressed his inability to offer such a benediction because he himself is not immortal. Therefore, immortality or complete cessation of the chain of repeated birth and death can be offered by the Supreme Lord, the Personality of Godhead himself, and not by others. Harim vinana mritam taranti. It is said that without the blessings of Hari, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, no one can stop the continuous chain of birth and death within this material world. Therefore, the Supreme Lord is also called Bhavachit. The Vaishnava philosophy in the process of Krishna consciousness prohibits the devotee from all kinds of material aspirations. A Vaishnava devotee should always be Anyabilashita Sunya, free from all material aspirations for the results of fruitive activities or empiric philosophical speculation. Dhruv Maharaj was actually initiated by Narad Muni, the greatest Vaishnava, in the chanting of Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. This mantra is a Vishnu mantra. For by practicing the chanting of this mantra, one is elevated to Vishnu Loka. Dhruv Maharaj regrets that although he was initiated in the Vishnu mantra by a Vaishnava, he still aspired for material benefits. That was another cause for lamentation. Although he got the result of the Vishnu mantra by the causeless mercy of the Lord, he lamented how foolish he was to have strived for material benefits whilst practicing devotional service. In other words, every one of us who is engaged in devotional service in Krishna consciousness should be completely free from all material aspirations. Otherwise, he will have to lament like Dhruva Maharaj. Om Ganatimirandasya Ganaghada Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Menobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sarajatam Sahaganana Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Savetam Savadutam Parijana Sahita Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Saghagana Lalita Shri Vikamtam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranami Hari Priye Vanchaka Paturubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyavacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavabhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So let us look at this verse together. Here we see that the theme appears to be Dhruva Maharaj not understanding, lamenting on his misunderstanding of the soul's position, of his position, and his foolishness for praying for temporary material benefits. So here in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, and in the first few sentences it says there, that this word, an atmya, without meaning, without the conception of the soul, is important to note. So we can understand that what was happening here is simply that Dhruva Maharaj, he didn't understand his position. Similarly as we don't tend to understand our position. And what is that position? Is to be the servant of Krishna. But how do we first get to that understanding? First we need to understand the eternality of the jiva and the eternality of everything, and where we are in the position of that, how we are actually just a small spark and part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Another important part of this, in the first part of this purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions the personality Srila Rishabhav Dev. So Srila Rishabhav Dev, he was actually a king, and he had 100 sons. We read about him in the Srimad Bhagavtam, in Canto 5. specifically in the 5th chapter. So if anyone wants to look this up presently now or afterwards, this is a wonderful section, as all the sections are in the Srimad Bhagavatam. But here, this is actually a section of the Srimad Bhagavatam which Srila Prabhupada would often quote and often talk about. These instructions that King Rishabhadev is giving to his sons. So, from verses 1 to 18, these beautiful instructions are given, whereby the king is actually instructing his sons on what? The fundamental principles of these philosophical teachings. The king here in these verses 1 to 18, he's actually telling his sons about the importance of the human form of life. So I'm going to take some various parts from the different verses, both from the purports and from the verses themselves. So here in the first text number 1, in the purport, the emphasis is on how our human life is different from the animals. We hear this so many time and time again. Srila Prabhupada is emphasizing how we have to understand that this is important and why we are different from the animals. Like a lot of the time when people come to, some kind of altruistic or verging on spiritual understanding, they want to understand that all beings are equal. And in one sense that is true, isn't it? Because we all have Paramatma inside us. And we all are a jiva. But the difference is that humans are awarded a form of life which is different from that of the animals, because we have the potential, of course, for that higher consciousness. So with that, knowing that we have that potential, and knowing that that ultimately is our aim of life, we need to act differently from the animals. Many times we hear Srila Prabhupada saying that all life forms are simply involved in which things? Eating, mating, defending, and sleeping. Yes. So this is the activity which is often quoted by Srila Prabhupada as the same thing as the hogs and the dogs, the cats and the pigs, all the different forms of animal life. And we should not try to decorate our life as a more sophisticated animal just by doing it in more extravagant and intricate ways. Because what are the animals essentially doing? They're doing some form of sense gratification. And just to put it down to the level of animal life, it is quoted in this purport, animals like dogs and hogs enjoy sense gratification by eating stool. So this is like, we don't glorify the sense gratification. We can see here the mood of Srila Prabhupada. It is not a glorious thing at all. So in this verse, it is likened that human beings can actually spend their whole day doing severe hardships, working hard from the morning all the way until the evening, doing so many different hardships. And then at the end, the need is there to reward themselves, simply to gratify their senses at night by eating, drinking, mating, and sleeping. So, and at the same time, of course, defending that thing which they've been working so hard for. Some way, trying a way to guard it by way of fences, by way of alarms, by way of competing with their fellow neighbors. So many different ways that ordinary human beings will do these propensities. So human civilization is not human civilization. Human civilization is meant for something so much higher, which is why we can understand we were given the system and the structure of Varnashram, which aims to help human civilization understand that there is a higher purpose and a higher goal of life for all the different stratas, all the different persons involved and where they're at. So meeting them where they're at and showing them in this way you can elevate yourself to this mode of goodness. So human life actually means voluntarily practicing suffering for the advancement of spiritual life. Yes. So we all try to understand this theoretically, and we all try to do this on a daily basis as part of our practice here at the temple and as part of our practice as devotees living in the world. So in the verse, King Rishabdev actually says that one should engage in penance and austerity to attain the divine position of devotional service. And by such activity, one's heart is purified and one attains this position. He attains eternal blissful life, which is transcendental to material happiness and which continues forever. The king then instructs his sons on this process of devotional service throughout the following next verses, up until 18. He describes that initially the most important thing is to what? To render service to highly advanced spiritual personalities. Then he goes on to describe what are the qualities of those personalities. So those personalities should be equipoised, and they do not see any difference between one living entity and another. They are fully engaged in devotional service, and they are devoid of anger. They work for the benefit of everyone, and they do not behave in any abominable way. Furthermore, these descriptions go on to describe who are the devotees of Krishna and what are they interested in. So those who are interested in learning about Krishna, expanding their Krishna consciousness, becoming Krishna's devotees, they endeavor not to associate and have no interest actually in associating with those worldly minded persons. For those people who are, so there's no interest in associating with people who have interests which are not related to Krishna consciousness or not related to attaining Krishna in some way. A devotee will naturally always will naturally always bring Krishna back into the conversation. And as we mature more and more in our Krishna consciousness, when we are preaching to others, we will be able to tactfully listen to what they are saying and find a way to bring them closer to Krishna, either by actually directly talking about Krishna consciousness or talking about activities which will bring them closer to Krishna and different qualities of devotional service and different ways in which, of course, they can also be involved. Another thing is that those who are aspiring devotees of Krishna are not attached to home, family, wealth, or possessions. They are only collecting enough, in fact, to keep their mind, body, and soul together. So this is the difference between worldly-minded persons and those who are interested in becoming the devotees of Krishna. Whereas those who are very much absorbed in material life, they're very much interested in collecting for the sake of collecting, isn't it? Whoever is, if you ever know somebody who has a lot of money, a lot of material possessions, and you ask them if they are satisfied, are they truly satisfied? You will find that they will often say, when you get down to the root of it, that they're not satisfied and that there can never be enough. Because it doesn't matter. If you become the millionaire, you see somebody else who is a billionaire, and you also want to attain more and more. It becomes completely insatiable. So contrary to this, someone who is interested in Krishna consciousness, is only interested in collecting just enough that they need. They don't need in excess. They only need enough to keep their, as it's quoted here, to keep the mind, body, and soul together. Enough for what is needed just to live in an okay way, but not to live into excess, into extravagance. Because when we do that, we have the danger of going into sense gratification. So one who is an aspirant for Krishna, just to summarize here, does not like to involve in anything which is separate or not related from Krishna. So those who are worldly minded, those who are in the materialistic point of view, they understand that what do they think is the aim of life? What are they basically doing? Why are they endeavoring all the time? Exactly, sense gratification. They actually thinking that sense gratification is the aim of life, and they are mad after materialistic living. So what does that cause when we become, our senses are just crazy after more and more? It's insatiable. What does this lead to ultimately? It leads to lamentation, but it means that we end up to engage in all kinds of sinful activities, increasing more and more. Because that which takes us away from Krishna only takes us to the other side of things. When we are only interested to gratify our senses, first it's subtle, and it seems like the mind finds ways to excuse it. But more and more, we actually begin to engage in larger quantities or more heavy sinful activities. So one who has that consciousness actually has no awareness of their past misdeeds. In other words, they don't have an understanding of karma and of reincarnation. They choose not to think about this, because if they were to think about this, they would understand the reason why. They would understand that they're being one, that they're coming back again and again. And why? Because of the misdeeds from their previous lives. And that means that they will come and return into the material body, the material conception of life. We know, or we begin to know, as aspiring devotees of Krishna, we begin to understand that this material body is actually the cause of all miseries, and is, of course, as we read about in our foundational understanding, this material body is just temporary. But we, as that spirit soul within, this is eternal. So this understanding, this knowledge of who we are as the jiva is super important. As King Rishabhavdev is pointing out to his sons, again, we understand this is the foundation. So it is just not the natural position of the jiva to be embodied, to be embodied in a material body, to be deha. So what is the reason, again, for us to be awarded with the material body? Karma, which is because of sense gratification. Very good. So, therefore, it is understood that all intelligent persons should not try to be perpetually involved in this cycle of sense gratification and attaining material body after another and another and another and another. And that they should actually, if one is intelligent, should try and break free from this process, this cycle of karma. Therefore, one should inquire about spiritual life and should become free from fruitive activities. Furthermore, King Rishabhavdev instructs his sons. We see in verse 5, he actually says that as long as the mind is impure, consciousness is therefore unclear. And as long as one is absorbed in fruitive activity, he has to accept a material body. Moving to the next verse, that when the living entity is covered by the mode of ignorance, he does not understand the individual living being and the supreme living being, and his mind is subjugated to fruitive activity. Therefore, one has love for Lord Vasudeva, if none other than, who is none other than, it says myself, because actually King Rishabhavdev is actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You can read actually in that 5th canto, in the 5th chapter, all about how actually King Rishabhavdev came into being. how his parents were praying for such a personality to become born from them. So therefore, until one has love for Lord Vasudeva, who is none other than myself, he is certainly not delivered from having to accept a material body again and again. It continues, even though one may be very learned and wise, he is mad if he does not understand that the endeavor for sense gratification is a useless waste of time. Being forgetful of his own interests, he tries to be happy in the material world, centering his interest around his home, ultimately, which means, again, the expansion of more and more sense gratification. So we here in New York, we have this difficult task of actually informing the people that we meet that they are, that they are stuck in this cycle of sense gratification, and we try to show them something higher. We call it the higher taste. Often this comes in the form of prasadam. It's the first easiest way to convince somebody and to just change something, to have their heart for one moment, just have a little glance over it. Who is that? That's Paramatma. And have that opportunity to hear what is coming from the devotees and to accept just a molecule of this knowledge which we are trying to preach, which we are trying to give. Have them maybe take this book, take this prasadam, or even come to one of our wonderful outreach events. It's often very hard, isn't it, to tell people, to get them to admit initially that they are suffering. But all of us here today, we've all come to some kind of a point where we've understood that we are suffering, and this is how we're able to approach Krishna, approach him from different aspects, either for, as we understand in the Bhagavad Gita, for that search of the absolute truth, or because we actually need some, what is real wealth, etc. There are different examples. One of the main things that King Rishabdev tells his sons is what? What is one of the first real steps in our spiritual journey? Submission to a spiritual master. Excellent, Kanagopal. Yes. To accept a spiritual master in one's life is when we really start to commit to this process. So simply that can be, even that first step can be to listen submissively to our Shiksha Guru. Normally that's our first Guru. And then they will help us to go onto the path of finding out who is the Diksha Guru, who is the one who will give us this mantra and initiate us into this disciplic succession, just as it's mentioned here in the purport that Narad Muni did for Dhruv Maharaj. Narad Muni initiated Dhruv Maharaj into the disciplic succession by giving him this Vishnu mantra of Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, furthermore, King Rishabdev instructs various instructions to his sons, because he instructs his sons to accept him, the Father, and also, of course, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the ultimate spiritual master. He instructs them to take him, his 100 sons, as the spiritual master. And he gives them various points. He tells them, you should detest sense gratification and tolerate the duality of pleasure and pain, just like the seasons, just like the changing seasons of summer and winter. You should realize the misery of material life, even in the heavenly planets. So you should understand that it's all temporary. Everything in the material world is temporary. And ultimately, that is the misery of it all, because it doesn't matter how much you do, you lose it. Ultimately, it's not important. And ultimately, it doesn't travel with you. Of course, like if you learn to become a lawyer, if you learn to become a wonderful musician, these things will travel with you as long as you are in this material body. You will then be born as a child protege who is excellent at law and music, because you perfected these things in a previous life. But you will still be stuck. You will not go back home ultimately to the spiritual abode. And we learn in the next verse that this is This is another cause for Dhruv Maharaj's lamentation. He realizes that even though he's gained the ultimate, he's reached this Vasudev platform as it was described in the previous verses. He's reached this complete understanding of who he is, and he's attained the darshan of Krishna. He still is not being permitted to immediately then just go back to Godhead. He's being told he has another 36,000 years because he had these material desires. He's getting these material desires. But of course, when one reaches that platform of pure devotion, one wants nothing more than to just spend one's time, all of one's time, in the association of the Lord. So King Rishabdev, again, he is instructing that we must philosophically inquire about the truth, the absolute truth. We must then undergo all kinds of austerities and penances for the sake of devotional service. So we understand that even though it is described that devotional service should be joyfully carried out, and it is a joyful process, there are also many austerities and penances involved for the sake of devotional service. Many times people will ask, like, what are devotees doing all day anyway? And actually, if we try to explain to people, they can understand, and we can understand, that devotees work so hard. They're always doing something, always trying to find a way to engage their mind and to engage their activities in the service of the Lord and the devotees. So this leads to all kinds of austerities and penances. There are so many wonderful stories of those devotees who have gone before us, who have enabled us to have such wonderful and glorious temples such as these. All those devotees, those disciples of Srila Prabhupada, who literally put down their lives, in their prime of their lives, when they're in their 20s, early 20s and so on, they abandoned all material ambitions and immediately did anything they could for Srila Prabhupada because they were so inspired by him and so much they could feel the love of God that Srila Prabhupada had. And this was highly attractive. So they, of course, wanted to serve him. So they gave up all endeavor for their sense enjoyment and engaged in the service of the Lord, going through all kinds of austerities to, especially in India, you hear the wonderful pastimes of the devotees who actually built our wonderful Krishna Balaram temple there. If you want to hear more of these stories, you can look up, we recently had the 50th anniversary of the installation of Shri Shri Krishna Balaram, and you can hear the stories of the different devotees who went through all kinds of hardships to have that temple erected and built. Not just there in Vrindavan, but different devotees were collecting to send money to build the different temples, just as we're doing today with our the temple of the Vedic planetarium in Mayapur. Still today, we collect, devotees go out on book distribution, devotees endeavor in different ways so that we can see and we can realize this beautiful vision and bring others, educate others to this glorious process of understanding who they divinely are. King Rishabdev also instructs that we must listen to discussions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and always associate with the devotees. Now, this always associating with the devotees, it's a constant thing. It's a constant theme. And we're all just so fortunate that Srila Prabhupada, one of his main founding principles, as I was discussing previously, is that ISKCON's purpose is to do that, to be able to create these temples and these places of worship, places of pilgrimage, so that devotees can come together, come closer together, talk about Krishna and associate with one another. We must chant and glorify the Supreme Lord and look upon everybody equally on the spiritual platform. Give up enmity and subdue anger and lamentation, and abandon identifying the self with the body and the home. Practice reading revealed scriptures. Of course, it is also instructed that we should live in a secluded place and practice the process by which we can control our life, air, mind, and senses. So this is likened, we can understand this when we see today what we are doing here by living here in these temples and by practicing our sadhana bhakti. We have, our temples are here in all the major cities of the world and are spreading now to the towns and the villages by way of home programs and smaller preaching centers. So in this way, we're able to allow others to come in and be in essentially what is a secluded place, another place which is none other than Vaikuntha, wherever we practice this worship of the Lord, wherever we're actually preaching and sharing the Srimad Bhagavatam, preaching the glories of the Lord, it becomes a Vaikuntha place. So as well we can understand that even within us, when we go out, when we go to preach, when we go on traveling Sankirtan, that secluded place exists within our heart. And more, when we do such things, when we go traveling, we can actually deepen our practice, deepen our process. We should have full faith in the revealed scriptures and should always observe our vows of celibacy, performing our prescribed duties and avoiding prajalpa, always thinking of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and acquire that knowledge from the correct sources. So, in other words, to summarize this, thus by practicing Bhakti Yoga, we will patiently and enthusiastically be elevated in knowledge and will be able to give up the false ego. So another thing which is spoken about in this purport by Srila Prabhupada is this famous verse, again, from C.C., the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 19 and verse 167, where there is a description of what is pure devotional service, which is this famous verse, which is Anyabilashita sunyam jnana karmadi anavratam anakulena krishnano shilam bhakti uttama. So one should render transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord Krishna favorably, without desire for material profit or gain, through fruitive activities or philosophical speculation. And that is called pure devotional service. We can see, of course, in the first chapter of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, this is also used as the definition of pure devotional service. So, we should not render loving service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead for any other cause or any other benefit, material or spiritual. And this is the first symptom of unalloyed devotion. In previous days, we've talked about this unalloyed devotion, and I was comparing it to that of 24 karat gold. And of course, we have other forms of gold, but those are, of course, their alloys, because 24 karat means pure. When we have 22 karat, 18 karat, 14 karat, it means that other things have been mixed in to this. So it appears to be gold, but actually it is an alloy. It is not pure gold, so it does not have the same quality. And essentially that means that it doesn't have, when we look at this, again, this understanding of what is sincerity. Sincere, we always quote this, sincere comes from that Latin of the marble not having any wax in it. So we want to be pure, flawless. That is our aim. Without any things, any impurities, any essentially contaminations mixed in. Not just to be on the surface, appear, to have the dress, to do the appearance of the outside activities of what is a devotee, but internally, personally, individually within us, we need to really think about and aim for the depth of this Krishna consciousness and understand the magnanimity of what is being given to us and how deep this process is and how we personally, it is our responsibility, what we need to do is we are the ones who need to clear our heart. Of course, we do this in a process with others. We see it reflected in our interactions with others. When we have a less than favorable interaction, we can reflect back and think, what am I to learn from this? How can I see, with the finger pointing, which fingers are pointing back? How can I understand how actually I'm also guilty of this thing in some aspect, in some understanding? So one must be devoid of all the material desires. Of course, this is a process. This is a gradual thing. And actually, by engaging in this process of devotional service, by readily and enthusiastically taking up, as a consequence, we start to shed these material desires. His Holiness Kadamba Kanana Maharaj would often quote this wonderful, he had this wonderful analogy. He would talk about material desires. And it's likened to how, if you ever I'm going to have a big clear out of my living space. So he would often say, grab all of those material desires, put them into a box, put them all, like metaphysically or like literally, if one's clearing one space, put all those things into a box. Then put the box away into the into the cupboard, somewhere away. Now everything is clean and tidy. And ultimately, and then maybe in some time, a couple of months, 1 year, you can come back to that box and have a look and see what is there. Probably things will not be relevant anymore. Things will not have any relevancy to you. So this is the nature of these material desires, these material acquisitions even. They're not so much important because once we come to satisfy them, we can't become satisfied. We're insatiable. So they become unimportant. The different things that we acquire they dissolve away. They don't actually have much importance or relevancy in our life. So when a person becomes devoid of all material desires, there is no longer a need for speculative knowledge or fruitive activities. In that condition, it is to be understood that one becomes free from this material body. Srila Prabhupada gives the example of a coconut. So that when the coconut, when we have the dry coconut, so there's different kinds of coconut. There's the green coconut when it's still on the tree. And that has a very green, thick husk, and it's quite difficult to crack that open. You have to have a special tool. Someone has to break into it. There's lots of fibers. And inside, that initially when we're having that kind of coconut, there's lots of water, lots of juice. But the example is given of the dry coconut. So what happens when the coconut dries, when you get the brown coconut that we use for our cooking? Has anyone used one of those? So what happens is that actually it becomes loosened from that husk naturally over a process of time, drying through the sun. That coconut, it's described as coconut flesh inside becomes loosened from the shell. And it becomes quite easy. We just crack open the coconut and there it is. The coconut is ready to use. We can grate the coconut. So this is it was described as an analogy for this stage of liberation. All material desires are present as long as one is in this bodily conception of life. But when one realizes that he is an eternal servant of Krishna, his desires are no longer material. And the devotee acts in this consciousness. So in other words, when the material desires in connection with the bodies are finished, that is when one becomes actually liberated. So we can understand that the desire which is wished for, what is the desire that everyone wishes for in the material world? Whenever someone becomes like a great materialist, he becomes a billionaire, a trillionaire, what is he aiming for? What do they all search for? Happiness. They're searching for happiness. And they think that what they want is essentially what did we see? I think even that guy, what is he called? Hugh Hefner? What was he in search of? He wants eternal life. I don't know if he's still, I apologize to anyone that, I don't know if he's still alive actually, but I know he was on a search. He wanted to find a way where he could live forever because he thought his life was perfect. He had a misunderstanding that his life was perfect because as an old man, he had surrounded himself with beautiful women and he had riches and a wealthy life. And so he thought, I want to go on forever in this way. And many other materialists, they also come to the same thing. They want to find a way where they can slow down this process of aging. But interestingly enough, we see here that, as it's quoted in the purport, that Hiranyakashipu, he also wanted eternal life. He went to Lord Brahma asking for that. Lord Brahma couldn't give it to him. And the only one who can give eternal life to anyone, or real eternal life, where we're actually aware of it, is, of course, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is interesting, and I find slightly, in a way, it's slightly amusing that those persons who want this the very most are the most blind to this, because they have no understanding of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they've gone so far away. But ultimately, what they want is linked to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and can only be given by Him. And of course, it can only be attained by pure devotional service. So, finally, let's look a little bit more. There is another thing that's mentioned in this purport, and that is this wonderful mantra which we chant every day when we're going to begin our spiritual philosophical discourse, which is Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, the translation of which is, I offer my respectful obeisances to Lord Vasudeva or Krishna. Alternatively, it's also, I offer my respectful obeisances to you, Krishna, because I surrender unto you. So, this is also actually the mantra which is chanted by the Madhav Sampradaya. This is the mantra that they use on their japa beads. So, the Madhav Sampradaya has its base in Udupi, and the temple was established there over 800 years ago. And we understand that when Lord Chaitanya went on his wonderful and famous tour of South India, he did spend quite some time in Udupi, and there it's where we actually became, as our lineage is called the Gaudiya Madhav Sampradaya. So this is part of our lineage. So let us understand a little bit about understand a little bit about who is Madhavacharya, how he came into being. So he we were just talking about King Rishabdev and how he came into being because his parents were fervently praying to have a divine personality just like that of Krishna as their child. So, actually, Madhavacharya was born in a similar way, in that his parents practiced many austerities. They were a very wonderful Brahmana couple who actually embarked on 12 years of rigorous austerities, subsisting solely on milk, and with fervent desire for an immortal son. So, of course, when anyone actually goes into a process of doing these austerities, of course, just like Dhruv Maharaj, it does ultimately catch the attention of Krishna when we're doing these in a process to, as devotional service, as an austerity, and as a way to try to get closer to Krishna. It catches his attention. So, in this way, at the time, the reason that they were praying for such a son was there was a decline, of course, as keeps happening, as we see, especially in this Kali Yuga time. There are these waves of the decline of Sanatana Dharma, and many atheistic ideologies were happening, exemplified by Buddhism and obscured by the philosophy of Shankaracharya's Mayavad, which was leading people to profound levels of ignorance of who, their ultimate cause. So, it is understood that Madhavacharya was actually, he's actually an incarnation of Vayu, the demigod of wind, who was previously incarnated as, in previous yugas, in Treta Yuga, he was Hanuman, yes, and in the Dwapara Yuga, as he was Bhima. So it's understood that this is actually who Sri Madhavacharya is, and he came in our Kali Yuga. So let us just touch upon how they have this beautiful deity of Krishna in this temple, this Lord Balakrishna. So has anyone been to Udupi in South India? Okay, so this is a very beautiful temple, and it's interesting because in South India, predominantly we have a focus on the worship of Shiva. This is the main worshipable Lord in most of South India. It is Shiva. So anyone who goes to South India, I highly advise you to go to Udupi, because there you will find some more understanding of how we are linked to this wonderful Madhav Sampradaya, where they have a beautiful temple, which inside they are worshipping Krishna very much in the mood of Dwapara Yuga, and in the mood of none other than the queens of those queens of Dwapara Yuga, those queens which Krishna took there. So in this way, they adorn the deity there in different golden armors made of real gold with real jewels, and the temple so you go into the temple, and all persons can go into the temple as long as you are devotional in some aspect. And there you can circumambulate this beautiful temple, which has lots of different gold articles around. They even, as well as part of the morning program there, they invite a cow with her calf to be viewed. Actually, the cow taking the milk from the calf is placed in front of, so the backside of the cow with the calf taking the milk is placed in front of this Balakrishna, and is understood to give pleasure to this deity. So it's very sweet, it's very nice. They have these wonderful traditions. And there are many different brahmanas who are available to do different kinds of pujas, who are all there in this whole vicinity. It is very nice to go to this temple. So but there's a very beautiful story as to how Balakrishna came. How Madhavacharya, one time, he was actually, he went to do some meditation. He was actually studying. It says on one day, Madhavacharya was engrossed in composing the Dvadasha Stotra, which is a renowned 12-part poem extolling Lord Krishna. So he had gone to the beach to do this, because it's nice, isn't it? We can all know that if we go to a nice body of water, it's a nice place for our meditation. We can get peace of mind. We can really start to meditate upon the Lord. We can focus our mind. So he became completely engrossed in this upon this beach. And whilst he was doing that, he actually witnessed that there was a ship stranded upon so on that Udupi beach, there are actually there are a few different hidden underneath. There are these rocky areas where it can be dangerous for ships to get stuck upon. So he saw that there was a ship that was stuck upon this, and he began to wave his cloth to try to help them to find a way out of that, as the waves were also quite turbulent in this area. So miraculously, the turbulent seas subsided and the ship was freed. So then Madhavacharya then guided the vessel to safety by waving them, because he understood that he was more familiar with that lagoon. In gratitude, the ship's captain offered him anything from the cargo. Interestingly, Super Soul was telling something to Madhavacharya. Madhavacharya, what did he ask for? That ship had so many things. It had so many riches. It had wonderful spices, wonderful riches, gold, gems, all kinds of things. But what did Madhavacharya ask for? Does anyone know? He could have asked for the captain. Does anyone know what Madhavacharya actually asked for? He asked for a lump of clay. Of all the things. So what was that lump of clay even doing in the ship? That lump of clay was actually serving as the ballast for the ship. So whenever you have a ship, even if you play with a toy, like as a child, I remember having a toy boat that I would play in my bath time I would have this ship, and it actually had in the bottom, I had to put a heavy weight so that the ship would actually stay properly floating and not just keep rolling over and capsizing. So every ship has such a thing. So this ship had this ballast, this big lump of clay. So let us track back a bit. Interestingly, what had happened? When they discovered in the past, it was actually understood that in that lump of clay, as was discovered by Madhavacharya's disciples, when they took back that lump of clay and they broke it in two, they actually revealed the deity of Lord Balakrishna. So this is the deity of Krishna that is worshipped in that temple today, even today. So how did this happen? It was understood that in the past, in Dwarka, they had actually done this. They had actually buried this deity of Krishna in Gopi Chandan. So the deity remained immovable until Madhavacharya personally embraced him and lifted him, reminiscent of a child. In an ecstatic state, Madhavacharya carried the Lord 4 miles back, all the way from that beach area to the temple area, to Kar Street in Udupi, completing the remaining 7 parts of the Dvadasha Stotra en route. So whilst he's carrying, in ecstasy, he's carrying this beautiful deity of Balakrishna all the way from the beach area, all the way back, which is 4 miles. He actually completes his 12 verses of poetry in glorification of Krishna. What a beautiful sight, what a beautiful pastime. There, he bathed the Lord in the sacred Madhava Savora lake and enshrined him in what is now there, this beautiful temple. So how this happened is actually, we can understand, I'll just briefly talk about this. During Lord Krishna's earthly pastimes, Mother Devaki expressed her deep longing to witness the Lord's childhood exploits in Vrindavan. Moved by her pure devotion, the Supreme Lord instantly assumed the form of a small child and playfully clambered onto Devaki's lap. Subsequently, when Devaki attempted to churn the butter, Krishna, behaving like a mischievous child, broke that churn and consumed chunks of butter and smeared butter all over his transcendental body. He even seized the churning rod and rope from Devaki's hands. These delightful pastimes of the Lord filled Mother Devaki's with immeasurable joy. Queen Rukmini Devi, Lord Krishna's consort, was a witness to these enchanting episodes, was captivated by the Lord's mischievous behavior and infantile features. To preserve the memory of these delightful moments, she had that deity fashioned in the likeness of young Krishna holding a churning rope and rod, which is this Balakrishna. Queen Rukmini commenced the worship of this deity with great devotion, and after the Lord returned to the spiritual realm with his retinue, Arjuna placed that deity in a location called Rukmini Vana. Over the centuries, the deity became encased in clay, remaining in that state near Dwarka until it was transported in this way, in this beautiful way, unexpected way, but at the same time knowing way, to Madhavacharya in Udupi by the merchant sailors. So actually, those personalities who are born in this Madhav Sampradaya, those who are sannyasis, they are understood in the Madhav Sampradaya to be incarnations of none other than those queens from the Dwarka Yuga who have been able, because it was given as a benediction, because they so desired to serve Krishna actually in his child form as Balakrishna, that they would be able to come back in the next Yuga and perform that worship. So they come back as these sannyasis in this Yuga to perform this worship, and Krishna fulfills that desire so that they can also enjoy Krishna in this childhood form. So I just wanted to share those beautiful pastimes and our connection to this Madhav Sampradaya, which is so beautiful because it's just one of the, it's nestled in this area, in South India, where it's distinct that they have this, we share a same devotion, wanting to give this devotion to Krishna, to know Krishna by this devotional aspects and relations. Whereas most of the surrounding area, they are not so much interested in that. So I've gone over time, and I'm very sorry for that. So just finally, in conclusion, we can understand, we can summarize that we should not separately endeavor or pray for material things whilst we're practicing our devotional service. Because we're probably not going to be as fortunate as Dhruv Maharaj as to be awarded ultimately both. We may end up risking just being awarded one of those things. And again, essentially, Dhruv Maharaj experiences this in a minute way. Well, it's not so much of a minute way, but he experiences it by not being able to immediately go back home, back to Godhead, by giving another 36,000 years of essentially service to the Lord in the material world, by being the wonderful king, which he desired to be. He gets his desire. And he also gets to do more service in the material world for the Lord as his pure devotee. So we should be, when we actually desire for material things whilst we're practicing our devotional service, it takes a conscious decision to do that. Because the nature of devotional service, when we get into it, the nature of devotional service is so absorbing. It's actually completely absorbing. Like those wonderful devotees, there's Narad Munidas has just walked in. He does so much service for the deities almost every morning. He's very humble. He's turning away. He does so much service every morning for the devotees. For the devotees ultimately, but he does this service of the devotees by our desire of wanting to serve Krishna, of serving our Shri Shri Radha Govinda, of serving our small Radha Krishna deities, the Shalagram deities here, Giri Govardhan. When we do this, when we get into these kinds of services, it's so absorbing, and actually time melts away, because those who are given this beautiful service of serving the devotees on the altar, they have, maybe 2, maybe 3 hours are allotted. But it goes so fast. It goes so fast because we become so absorbed in the different activities that are there, the different ways that we can offer devotion. And by keeping ourselves, our mind, our consciousness clean and free from these different contaminations, both like on a subtle level and physically as well, it only helps us to hone our meditation, to hone our focus on serving the Supreme Personality. So in this way, we can take inspiration from that. When we do any kind of service, when we're really focused on trying to do it for Krishna, when we're trying to do it with Krishna consciousness, it becomes completely absorbing, and we become in that mood of serving selflessly. So it's actually a separate endeavor to want for other material things. We have to separately become attached. We have to separately hold on to this thing. I'm holding this other thing back. You're holding something back because you want something materially. So what we need to do is develop full faith in this process to fully understand and to fully gain realization that we're eternal and that we are not this body. We read about it all the time, but we need to really fully think about, am I really realizing that? Am I really understanding that? Is that something which I'm living by? We need to live by this, not just think by this, but we actually need to live by it in our activities and actually have faith in this process, have faith in Krishna. So I'll end here. If anyone has any comments or questions, you're free to ask them. You're also free to go for the prasadam because I've gone more than 10 minutes over time, and I apologize for that. Yes. One moment, but there's a microphone coming.
So first off, thanks for serving as our Pauranika and telling us about Bhagavtam. I have a question. When we're speaking about Dhruva Maharaj,
Yes.
and his situation that living so long he won't be able to go back to Godhead, is that makes me wonder, for bhakti, is the goal to merge back with Bhagwan, or is the goal to have bhakti? Is bhakti itself the goal? Which one would you say?
That's a beautiful question. Bhakti itself is the goal, because in previous days we've talked about what is the inherent nature of the soul. It's Satchidananda. It's Satchidananda. So it means that one is eternal, full of knowledge and bliss. So ultimately, if we do attain, if our goal is to go and to merge into Krishna, ultimately that's actually the Brahma Jyoti. That's the effulgence of the Lord. That it's likened to that of the sun. It's understanding that there is the light that's coming from the sun, and we're only interested energetically in that light, rather than understanding like what is the nature of the sun, like how does that come to be, and what is the personality, how does it manifest? Is there a possibility? Of course, the sun's a bit of an odd one to say have a relationship with, but so Bhakti Yoga is about having a relationship with Krishna and actually understanding what is our true nature. Because if we just go to become one with this effulgence of Krishna, energetically become one with Krishna, we commit suicide for our own unique individuality, and that means we can't have a relationship with Krishna. And as you know, what is everyone looking for in this whole creation? Single thing is looking for connection, is looking for relationships. That doesn't go away. It never goes away. So it's funny because there's a thing, it's like to eternally be in this Brahma Jyoti. Well, eternality is that's especially like, where does that ever end? It's a really long time, right? It means always. So at some point, the nature of the soul, the nature of that jiva, will try to find something more than only being in happiness and bliss. It will search for a relationship. And when that happens, one returns once again. One ultimately will come back again to try to realize that. So Bhakti Yoga is the ultimate aim, because it gives full satisfaction and understanding of who we really are as spiritual persons and our relationship with the Supreme Lord. And just to reiterate, in case it wasn't clear, so Dhruv Maharaj does ultimately go back home, back to Godhead, but first he has these 36,000 years of remaining exactly as he is in his senses. Of course, his body is allowed to go on to that of a man. He doesn't stay as a 5-year-old. And he then serves as a king, actually at the service of Krishna. But he laments that he's not, because he had that attachment, that he isn't able to immediately go back to Godhead and just be in the association of Krishna. Thank you for that beautiful question.
Thank you. Hare
And thank you
Krishna.
for attending this Srimad Bhagavatam class. Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.